Hey everybody, welcome to the panel. It's really obvious from the title what this is about. I'm just kidding. My name is Danny Bernstein, and I lead the partnerships team for Google+. So really happy to have everybody here. This panel is going to introduce some of the earliest partners of the Google+ sign-in product, and kind of taking opportunity here with our esteemed panelists who we'll introduce in a second to chat a little bit about why they decided to be early adopters of this product. Google has many, many launches over the course of a year and talks to lots of different companies at different times. And so it'll be interesting and kind of a nice opportunity for these guys to talk about why they decided to adopt early, and just generally speaking, then go in a little bit of depth on what they're doing actually with their integration. And these are three apps that are kind of household names at this point that have significant adoption. So that's really cool. So in case you haven't kind of gotten the quick Google+ sign-in overview, let me just do that in about 30 seconds. What Google+ sign-in is an authentication option for websites, for applications. And what it's allowing you to do is use your Google credentials to log into websites. And it makes it much easier then to have an application personalized. And this is sort of a trend that's happening kind of all throughout application now, which is that you expect to have personalized or familiar experiences within applications, and now Google's making that very easy. And we also think that users prefer Google in that environment. They trust Google, and it's a great kind of a choice to put in front of users to enable that. And what we're doing with Google+ Sign-In is that we are giving developers this choice for authentication, but then we're also putting lots of functionality underneath it that's sort of additional value. So for example, and you might have seen this example a couple of times, when you log in with Google, and if you own an Android device, we will then open up a window that says, would you like to also download the application? And so it turns out that 40% of Android users that log in with Google then download the app. So it's a big number. And so that's just an example of the kind of thing we're doing. We announced yesterday that once a user downloads the app, they're then automatically logged in. So what Google will continue to do over the course of the next several quarters is release more and more sort of cool things for developers, for businesses that can help them build a Google+ integration that adds significant value. All right, so we have three panelists here today. We have Jessica Yee from Fandango, who is the Chief Product Officer there. We have Manolo Espinosa, who is the Head of Audio at SoundCloud. And we also have Robyn Peterson, who is the CTO of Mashable. So these guys have volunteered to kind of participate today and share what they're doing. And what they represent are just three of the many companies who said, well, this product launched at the end of February, but we want to be early. We want to kind of we want to be one of the case studies. And so they're going to now kind of walk you through their integrations. So we will begin with Fandango.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica. As many of you probably know, Fandango is a movie ticketing company. We also have a lot of movie information, broader community around it, and you probably all have used Fandango for showtimes. We like to believe that movie going is largely a social event. Maybe every now and then you go by yourself, but for the most part, you're doing it with other people. And there's a broader life cycle around movie going where you're in three distinct phases: planning and discovery and consideration, where you're watching trailers, maybe checking out reviews, looking at photos, just learning about movies. And then once you've decided you're actually going, you're in a planning and buying mode, and then afterwards you're in a discussion mode. And all of these phases have social touch points where you're communicating with either your immediate friends or a larger movie-going community at large. So one of the things that we've focused on in our implementation that we're showing here is the middle phase, where that's kind of our sweet spot of planning and going. You can see we've revamped our sign-in page here to make it really easy to have multiple options for sign-in. If you want to carry your identity with you from Google, or if you already have a Fandango login, we can tie the two together. If you go to the next slide, you can see this is a typical Showtimes page. And at that moment where you're figuring out, you've selected the movie, the theater, and you're actually looking at a showtime, we make it really easy with this integration to be able to push that out to your circles or immediate friends through clicking on the Google Plus icon there. And then that comes up as a join me sort of message on a Google platform. So you don't need to be on Fandango, you don't need to send an email. You're kind of alerting them across multiple platforms. So we think that's going to have great reach for our community and be able to join people in a way they haven't really done before. That's one instance of it. We plan to roll out across all the multiple touch points in pre and post. So this was a great start to it. It's an interactive post. And I think that another flavor that we're talking about, it's no visual here, is the app activities. We think trailer watching is actually a huge activity that is a great marker for movie interests up through, when it first releases, up through opening weekend and even after. And that kind of aggregated activity, stuff that doesn't necessarily show up in a feed, is really important data.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, one thing I think that I was really interested in participating in the process with you and your team was how the decision was made internally to kind of move forward with this integration. Like what are the consideration points? What are the kinds of things that a company like Fandango, with sort of a structured development and kind of process, how do you approach a development and technology decision like this?
Well, there are two parts, obviously business value and implementation effort. On the business value side, we have over 40 million uniques a month across our platforms. And all the interactions that we have with our customers sometimes can happen on kind of a one-off basis. And what this allows us to do is really amplify the value that we're providing to our customer base and get that message across multiple platforms. So as we talked about watching trailers, ratings and reviews, ticket purchases, any of those activities can really be broadcast more widely. From an implementation perspective, it didn't take our team that long to build it, so the immediate return was there for us in that calculation.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, well, we will now hear from Manolo talking about SoundCloud.
Great, thanks, Danny. First off, I wanted to thank the Google Plus team, Seth, Danny, Jiro, Ardan. They're an amazingly dedicated team that's just passionate about creating a wonderful service, and they've been great partners to work with. SoundCloud is the world's largest audio platform. We reach about 200 million users a month. It's about 8% of the internet. Creators upload about 10 hours of content every minute, and those creators range from professional musicians like Beyonce to folks who create music out of their bedroom or basement. Programs like This American Life, The White House, expectant parents who want to record the heartbeat of their child and share that. We have offices here. I'm based here in San Francisco, but we have offices in Berlin, London, Sofia, and New York, and that allows us to leverage our API that's really, really flexible to provide an extremely socially connected service. One of the things that we're always looking at, and I lead a platform here in San Francisco, is how to leverage external relationships. So I work with Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and now Google. We are extremely passionate about all things music and audio, and so Google Plus allowed us to extend the social experience and to leverage a simple sign-on. We launched Google Plus sign-in on our web app, our mobile web, and just on Monday, our iOS and Android. It was a simple process, well documented, great communication, and we're excited to continue iterating on that. So you see on that first slide and on that one right there as well, just that accessibility early on from an onboarding perspective. We think that's great. What we also did, if you want to go to the next slide, this is a basic navigation when people enter in our name, SoundCloud, in Google search. One of the things that we think is really interesting is that when people are looking for SoundCloud, starting from Google, they're looking for content. And what we want to do is we want to have a hook to that content that they're aware of and can click and get a deep link to that and suddenly be surprised by content that may be really popular on SoundCloud and immediately get to that. And Google Plus, with this integration, if you see on the next slide, provides us with that hook, a very good hook, right? Every day, folks start their navigation from Google. I'd love it to start on SoundCloud, but they start everywhere else as well. And if they're looking for something, to be able to provide them a link right there, and if you see on the right side, underneath our logo, there's a link to an Economist article. An Economist has been working with us for about 2 years. They have great Economist Radio, great content. And clicking on that drives you right into SoundCloud so you can immediately interact with it, listen to it, share it. And how we get to that content on Google is because Google Plus users are playing and sharing, and that activity gets moved over to Google and helps populate that. So we think being at the port of entry, having a presence at the port of entry there that provides that deep link is phenomenal.
It's a big deal for Google because we're now able to work with a SoundCloud or Fandango and actually get activity information that we can bring into places like search. So this is an exciting kind of new data opportunity for us, and in the process we're able to add more links in search. And so this is just the beginning, but it's neat to have a showcase like SoundCloud. So, all right, Robyn.
Great. Hey, everybody. Robyn Peterson, CTO of Mashable. And if you don't know what Mashable is, basically in a nutshell, we're an extremely social news site. So what that means is we cover the news that's trending on social sites like Twitter, Facebook, Google+. But we also cover the news, and this is almost more important, the news and kind of, cultural nuggets that are going to trend. So going about it, I'm going to give a little bit of history here, but going back about a year, we completely rebuilt Mashable. It's a custom Ruby on Rails app, but down at its core, most importantly, is something we call the velocity algorithm. And what the velocity algorithm really is a set of crawlers that go out to places like Google+ and Twitter and Facebook, and bring back all this great engagement data around published articles. We then dump that into a predictive engine that we created in-house, and it tells us, quite simply, what's going to go viral in about 4 hours. So we use that information to do all sorts of cool things. We have great dashboards for our editorial team so they can stay ahead of what's going viral on social, but they also use that to do cool things like lay out our homepage. Our entire homepage and all of our channel pages are all laid out by our velocity algorithm, deciding which things are going to go viral and promoting those in bigger slots. So the reason I bring that up is for two reasons. If you want to go on to the next slide, Danny. So one, since we're so social and since we're really, almost becoming one with these social networks that we cover, any kind of barriers between where the story starts, which is on our site, where that content is created and the conversation begins, to the place where the conversation then kind of propagates and in fact multiplies. And a place like Google Plus is that exact place. So what we did here is we not only integrated login and sign in and registration. It's very dramatic with the music, isn't it?
There's something going on in another room.
We dim the lights and
I'll
take you guys on a tour.
Like a live orchestra to kind of play
exactly.
It's amazing.
So I kind of like that. We can get it back
nice.
maybe. So when you're on Mashable and you're looking at an article, you can share that article, obviously, to Google+. When you do that, we're going to do something a little bit special. We're actually going to push along some information to Google+, such that when someone who's following you on Google+ sees the article that you just shared from Mashable, when they come back, your profile photo will be on the Mashable article, and you will get credit, so to speak, visual credit, for being the curator of that piece. And we're doing this for a couple of reasons. But really the main one, there's actually two. So the main, the top one there is that in news, there is a huge theme of, in the user-generated space called curation, right? The curator of a story is almost as important as the writer, the creator of that story, because the curator is the one that picks that story up and pushes it across the web, creating kind of like this whole viral snowball effect. So what we want to do is really incentivize our readers to become curators, and we're doing that here by putting their profile photo up there. And as that link gets shared around on Google+ or on other places, that curator gets credit for it, which is pretty neat. And you can see it here next to the primary image of this particular article. At Mashable, we create these things called, or we identify these things called micro-content within every article, and those are the elements of the article that are really the most shareable. So in this case, it's an image. If someone shares that image, the person who clicks and comes back will actually see the sharer's profile photo right there and say, this person has shared it with you. And then here's an example of what what we call in the industry a pull quote, but a quote on the article. This happens to be identified by the writer of the article as being a very shareable element. And when this particular user shared it off, and now we're coming back and looking at it, we can see that this person is identified as actually sharing the article, but from this quote. So this was the most shareable element to that person in the whole article, which is kind of neat. It really kind of incentivizes that person to keep sharing. And then the other thing that we did going beyond these slides is now knowing what you know about us, that everything was built on this velocity algorithm, and that we have this really cool display. We actually just launched a couple of days ago a Google Glass app. If anybody has Google Glass in the room, it'd be great if you'd connect to it. What we do there is when our velocity algorithm detects something about to go viral, we will send an alert to the people who are wearing glass who have connected to our app to tell them, hey, this story is about to go viral. And you can either read that article aloud, so have Google Glass read it aloud, the whole article in your ear so you can stay up to date. And then you can also share directly from Google Glass, and it will show up just like this. So we're integrating it not only on the site, but also in Google Glass, and represented like this, really giving credit to the curator.
Awesome. I think one thing that I noticed and the team noticed as we were reviewing the Mashable integration is that there is a kind of a simple elegance to the way that the sort of sharing attribution is displayed, which is a striking change from some of the original social kind of platform integrations where you would get a capture screen, you would have an aggressive sort of sign up. So I want to hear a little bit from you on that, because it's as if you are perhaps leaving some kind of user registration on the table, but sort of emphasizing then the user experience and things like that. So,
well, at Mashable we have 25 million monthly visitors, and the ones that follow us on social networks tend to have anywhere from 3 to 5 times the average number of followers on those social networks compared to the average person. So what we're talking about here is these really high clout with a C, social networkers, people who really have big followings on the web. So they're, in a sense, they're power users. They're really power users of the social web. So we feel that we really need to be subtle when we integrate these kind of elements, but also do it in a way that actually rewards that curator, and that's what we really aim for here.
Cool, awesome, good stuff. Well, we're now going to move in a little bit of a discussion, and then we will have some time for questions at the end, so just to let you guys know. So one thing that I think is really important for us is the Google Plus platform represents an entirely new way that third parties are working with Google. And that's a big deal. We've had APIs like Maps that are several years old. Of course, we've had a search product. Of course, we've had an ads product. But the Google Plus platform is very new. And I think one thing I'd like to hear from you guys, and perhaps to kind of get some thoughts stirring in the audience as well, is how can Google become easier for you to work with? How can we be easier as a potential partner, as a potential platform, as a potential developer experience and things like that? Love to kind of have you guys opine on that. Jessica?
I'll go first.
All right.
Well, you said easier, but I think being effective is something that we're thinking about. We talked about the life cycle of the customer and the different touch points that a user could have with Fandango in the various phases, and how Fandango experiences are represented across the Google platforms could manifest differently. So one of the things I think is really important is to think holistically about how Fandango and Google appear to the customer in the different life cycles. So perhaps on an opening weekend, which is kind of the height of our value, when you're doing a search on Google, you're seeing what's hot, what's selling this weekend. Earlier on, in a different context for a different keyword or something, we could be servicing content for discovery. And again, back to the other touch points, like how does it appear on Gmail, or how does it appear in search and other platforms? So it would be great to kind of paint a holistic picture for the user and say, what's the best way we can work together to create that kind of collective experience, as opposed to looking at it from a product standpoint and then seeing how you can apply it back to the business.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when we often talk to companies, they tell us that things like user registration, like sharing, like identity, are really hard, and they're looking to Google to kind of help solve some of those things. But in reality, those things have been really hard for Google. And part of what Google Plus is, as we think about how we work with partners, is that it is a common sense of identity across all of Google. It's a common way to share across all of Google. It's a common notification system across all of Google. And it's a common system of friends. And 2 years ago, those things did not exist. So if we have products like the little red notification square, and so the fact that we are able to unify these products and that there's a common sort of set of rules and systems and APIs, that makes things a heck of a lot easier. So that's sort of how we've thought about it.
And I would say on our side, just kind of building on what you're talking about there, Danny, this notion of multifaceted identity, I think, really needs to be understood by Google, and that's quite simply, as just taking me as the example. So I have my personal account, and that's what I've set up Google Plus on, and that's where I'm posting all my, kid photos and all those things like that. And then at Mashable, we're Google Apps customers, so I have my at Mashable.com version of me. And that's my business me and my personal me. And I keep having to flip accounts constantly. And I know
you also have your breakdancing account
and I have
as well.
That's all animated GIFs.
Okay, got
so
it.
that's a little easier. This kind of, if there was this understood notion that I'm more than just one email account, so to speak. There's a personal side to me, there's a business side of me, and how does Google, kind of understand that both of those exist?
Yeah, I think we've heard quite a bit of that this week in a lot of different sessions. As how to reconcile those, and also what is the data that you're missed and that's missing, and things like that. So I think we've heard that one kind of loud and clear this week quite a few times. So that's good.
So my thoughts are less on the technology side, but more on partnerships. Mm-hmm. We work with, for example, a lot of content creators that are journalists, and they want to work with us because we can help get their content across other social networks in a really, really easy way. And they, a lot of people see Google as an amazingly large company with so many different touch points, and they look to us to help connect them to that. I think a good example is how we can work with this integration and how that ties into Google News, for example. And this is a relationship. You start working on something, you iterate, you get better over time, and you see other opportunities. And any of those opportunities that we can then pass along to our creators is a huge opportunity there for us to make something very big and change the way people discover and share that content. It is an interesting thing when you are looking at taking something that's so socially connected and connect it across a company as large as Google. And I think anything that the organization can do to help clear that up, I think, is very useful.
Great. Awesome. So I think one last question, and then I think we'll open it up to the audience, is when you're approaching decisions like this, how are you, and we heard from Jessica on this point earlier, but how are you kind of arousing consensus and approaching something like this? And you guys at this point are anywhere from 50 to several hundred people inside of your companies, and an undertaking like adding a new sign-in option is significant. How did you think about that? How are you thinking about sort of the process before, and then also how are you thinking about it sort of in terms of assessing value?
Well, I think this one was kind of a no-brainer for us. We already had Google Plus sign-in, the previous version, and we have a very strong Google audience. Over 2 million likes, I believe, on Google Plus on our main page. But then if you add up, all of our writers' personal followings and those sorts of things, it's some n times that, right? Some x times that. So we have a really big following, and we know that the people who are really going to enjoy this feature are going to be the power users of Google Plus. So for us, we derive so much value from curators on the web, people sharing our content, that this is just one more step we can take to really accelerate that.
For us, it was a combination of listening to our users who want things to be super, super simple, but also listening to our content partners. And we had heard loud and clear that they wanted to be able to have an integration and embedding an experience there with Google+. Listening to those two parties, and then clearly working within an organization, our priorities, our roadmap, it's packed all the time. We are always struggling with that. This one was, I think, a combination of just prudent risk-taking, honestly, looking at, does this make sense for us, and having a leap of faith, and saying, look, I think
in this case, working across a couple different time zones.
time
as well.
zones, multiple offices across. We decided to do it across all our web app, mobile apps, et cetera. It's just a lot of things that had to synchronize. And ultimately, we thought that by listening to what our users wanted and our content partners wanted, that was a good thing.
Cool. All right. Well, we definitely have some time for questions. So, anybody in the audience wants to ask questions for our panelists here? Nobody? Oh, we got somebody here. Okay, cool. I think you're first, so you can.
Yeah.
All right.
First. All the screenshots that you showed, there was a big red button and alongside a big blue button. How does specifically Google Plus compare to other networks or social media platforms? Does it bring more value to you, or how does it compare?
Yeah, sure. We do see differences between the networks, but to be honest, there's kind of a few different users that we see. There's users who are just hardcore Google Plus users, hardcore Twitter users, hardcore Facebook users, but I think those users are actually somewhat rare in our world. I think we see more poly-network users, so to speak, where they're using a bunch of different networks and they use them for different things. So for instance, to throw one out that we didn't talk about here, how about LinkedIn? So LinkedIn performs very well for Mashable when we're talking about trends in the job market, or something about how to use some certain aspect of social in your career. It's not uncommon for those particular stories to be at the top of the charts for LinkedIn. Google tends to do well. The Google users tend to really enjoy Google I/O content, for one. That's doing, who would have known? Yeah. That's doing quite well for us, but there's just kind of different personas with each network, and we see them kind of, ebb and flow based upon that content.
We have heard from a couple of partners this week. I mean, so many of these integrations are just brand new, and this product actually only launched at the end of February. But three notable stats I heard this week from partners that are now okay to share. One is that The Guardian actually shared, the UK newspaper shared that on their Android app that Google Plus is now the preferred option of users. It's 41% of their social logins, and that's the biggest number. And I heard from both Flickster and Skill Pages that basically their social logins are evenly divided now between Google Plus and Facebook. It's really interesting, especially because Facebook's option launched 4 years ago, and we've been in the market for now less than 3 months. So there's clearly we think having user choice is a really, really good idea, and there actually are very different use cases for both of those. So I think we're generally speaking, we think choice is good.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Check. Hey guys. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the content personalization for publishers in the audience, like for Fandango and SoundCloud and Mashable. We saw some of the things like with Mashable, how you said the user really liked this piece of the article. Are we going to see more of kind of homepage landings personalized based on a social sign-in?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's going to be a big part of what you see from Mashable coming over the next year. If you think about what we've done so far, we're just kind of watching, in a sense, macro trends of what's happening with content. So this kind of article is about to go viral, and that one is too. But really, the more interesting nugget is within your group of friends. Maybe this one's going viral, but your friends haven't seen it. Would be fantastic for us. And these are the kinds of things that we're going to try to tackle at Mashable, and I think that goes right to the sweet spot of your question.
I think one question for you, Robyn, related to that is Mashable kind of adopting these things early. Are you engaging with other media companies now who are kind of saying to you, well, you're using this with social login. Hey, how do we do this? Can you productize it? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. We actually have heard that a lot. We've heard that a lot about Velocity in particular. Can we productize that? It's something that we're thinking about. It's something you could see from us over the next year or two. We're not sure, but we actually spend a lot of time working with other media companies, just trying to get out of our competitive mind spaces and work together to kind of advance media in general, because it's a tough landscape right now, right? So 68% of ad dollars for display ads goes to 5 companies that are historically thought of as the top tech companies, which means this kind of pie that's left for media companies to go after is getting smaller and smaller. So all us media companies kind of need to work together and start thinking more like tech companies, and that's really how we're going to get ahead and survive.
Yeah.
I have one thing to
Oh,
add
yeah,
to that. On the Fandango side, for content recommendations, it's sort of movie recommendations, and you could have a Netflix-like algorithm for that based on past purchase history, but a lot of it's based on my circle of friends might have similar taste to me, and that we could make movie recommendations based on your friends who've watched certain trailers or purchased tickets or have sort of genre interests. And then we can additionally curate content for upcoming movies and movie news and casting information, things like that, based on your interest levels.
Yeah, and for us, it's really new. I mean, we're just pushing out on this.
Yeah.
We have been working on recommendation stuff, but that's the power of innovating, right? You lean forward, you try something, you iterate. If it's something you really care passionate about, come work with us. We're hiring. It's something that we're always interested in, getting other people's perspectives.
Yeah, well, content recommendations, I think, is one of the hardest things for publishers to build. And so we've spoken now to dozens of publishers, and they all have a very stated desire to innovate around content recommendations and personalization of content. That being said, like those tech resources sort of always seem to get diverted to building video ads and things like that. So that's really, really challenging. I think that being said, I think we launched a content recommendations product for mobile websites just a couple of days ago. It's live on Forbes. So that's an area we're also really excited about, and you'll see a steady kind of wave of innovation around that from Google because we really want to sort of democratize that capability because it is so hard. It's so hard to do. It's so difficult to integrate. It really is sort of reserved for kind of the heavily resourced few, and we want to try to change that. So.
And I think it also goes to the point that you don't therefore want to spend those resources doing things like complicated sign-ins. You want to do an easy sign-in. You don't want to have to worry about how to force people to do installs. You do an over-the-air install with Android. You go for the simple things that are all tied together in one package. Then you can deploy those resources on the things that are really, really tough.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this and for participating here, for being in our sandbox, and for integrating so early. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.